Hello, students. In furtherance to the lecture that we had previously on water related laws and policies that we have in our country, I wish to discuss about this National Water Policy of 2002. Now, this water because this particular water policy was in furtherance to the previous policy, which came in the year 1987, which I believe I have mentioned and discussed. Now, the thing is that this water policy, the prime objective behind this water policy was to touch upon several aspects of water-related, challenges and facets that we have. And when we talk about water-related aspects, what I mean from that is not just the drinking water that we usually talk about, but at the same point of time, groundwater management is something which the General Water Act doesn't talk about, but it basically talks about the planning and management and development of these water resources, be it groundwater, be it surface water, all those other sources of water, to be very specific. Now, this water policy clearly highlights that it's a natural resource, and it is required for not just human beings, but it is also a precious national asset. So, for the same, if you look at from a national assets angle, then there are several aspects of governance which is required. So, planning, development, and management of these resources are required to be governed by the national perspectives. So, it was way back when in 2002 this water policy was adopted. They refer to some pre-existing facts and figures, in which you will also find they have referred to the precipitation and its confinement to particular areas. On one side we have the Rajasthan, which is quite struggling when it comes to water related resources. And on the other side we have Meghalaya, where we used to see highest rainfall. Now, in a way, the water is, of course, a part of a bigger ecological system, and we do realize its importance and its scarcity at the same point of time, which is basically attached to fresh water. Despite the fact, the substantial portion of this planet is covered with water, but when it comes to fresh water, when it comes to drinking water, we are pretty much lagging behind. So it needs to be treated in a very sustainable way, because we have to think about the wholesomeness of water, and we can only sustain, and all the other life forms can only sustain in this natural resource that we have. So, in addition to that, this water policy of 2002 clearly identifies that the country has entered this 21st century, and there is a requirement to develop, conserve, utilize, and manage this important resource. So, and of course, in a sustainable manner that is to be guided by the national perspective. Now, when you say something like that, it kindly highlights the crucial element of development, and you cannot, discard the socio-economic aspects and the needs of the states at the same point of time. So, the proper planning, development, conservation, and management is required, because water is scarce. And at the same point of time, it's a very precious national resource. So, at the same point of time, this policy also highlights the challenges that we've been facing for quite a long time: floods and droughts, for example, which affects the vast areas of this country. And 1/6 area of this country is drought prone, which is a very scintillating figure. So there is a dire requirement for management of droughts and floods, and that has to be coordinated and guided at the very national level. So that is the emphasis that they have given, since it's a national asset, it's a national resource. So a national perspective and proper coordination and guidance at the national level is required. So planning and implementation of this water resources projects, which usually involve numbers of socioeconomic and other issues relating to environmental sustainability, and also appropriate R&R, so-called resettlement and rehabilitation of those people who usually get affected. Their livestock gets affected, public health gets affected. There are so many factors which you have to take into consideration when you deal with water. And let's not forget other problems in addition to displacement or floods and droughts. We have the issues relating to waterlogging. We have issues relating to soil salination, and let's also not forget the issue of desertification. So it's a very complex factor that we have to keep in mind when we deal with water. And these complex issues of social justice and equity is also there, which in fact is quite related to water distribution of agricultural land, for agricultural land. So the development, overexploitation of groundwater resources in certain parts of the country have also raised several concerns, because of which the government decided back then, that the previous policy was not sufficient enough, so they have to think forward. And this is not that this policy is the final policy. Even after that is the 2002 policy. We again had a policy in the year 2012. We will discuss about it in the later part of time. So as of now, what we can see, that this particular national water policy, which was in furtherance to the 87 policy, identified, the previous policy also identified several issues and challenges with respect to development and management. And if you remember, 87, and that crucial point of time was the one when the concept of sustainable development also emerged. So it has been reviewed and dated, and here comes the final 2002 national water policy, which emphasized on information system. So that is a requirement which is necessary, because until and unless you have a very standard, it is very difficult also to understand the nature of the problem that you're dealing with. And that's why this national policy emphasized on a standardized national information system, which should be established with a network of data. So data procurement, integration and strengthening of existing central as well as state level agencies is required. And that's why improvising the quality of the data and processing capabilities have been emphasized. And that's why more emphasis have been given for improvement of information system. And that's why they have emphasized on standards for coding, classification, process of data and methods, etc. So an exchange of information, free exchange of information, because several agencies are involved. See, we have irrigation department, we have water resources, Ministry of Shipping, inland water, so on and so forth. And we have also several boards, the several boards and bodies created. Like for example, we have Ganga River Management Authority. Then we have say Brahmaputra River Board, so on and so forth. So like this, we have several other agencies which are pretty much upgraded with the knowledge and technological capacity. So that is required. And at the same point of time, this policy is asking for an integration of this information, proper exchange of information, which is required in a way. So that's why information system is one of the elements of the 2002. Water resource planning is another element which is in fact required. And this policy is all about planning management, right? So the non-conventional methods for utilization of water, like for example interbasin transfers, artificial recharge of groundwaters, desalination of brackish or seawater, and even traditional water conservations like rainwater harvesting and all, rooftop rainwater harvesting, that is required to be practiced in furtherance to the previous policy they have emphasized. And there is a need to be practiced to further the increased to increase the utilization of water resources. So they have this policy also emphasized on promotion of frontier research and development, which is focused on these techniques, non-conventional methods of utilization of water, right? Be it interbasin transfers, as I've mentioned, any other artificial recharge of groundwater, desalination of brackish water, rainwater harvesting, etc., etc. So water resources development and management will have to be planned for a hydrological unit. And that's why they have emphasized on the same, that the drainage basins such as the whole or sub-basin multi-sectorally, taking into account the surface and groundwater for sustainable use, incorporating the quantity and quality aspects, as well as the environmental considerations. So whatever development projects and proposals that you're formulating, they should keep in mind, they should have very overall plan in, keeping in mind the existing agreements, or or any existing framework with respect to basin management or sub-basin management, so that they can have a best possible combination of options before they go ahead with it. So they cannot just blindly, and when I'm saying they, I mean the state agencies, they cannot just blindly go ahead and adopt some planning or development mechanism without considering the pre-existing, environmental, pre-existing agreements or arrangement that is already there in place with respect to basin. So this is a significant part. In addition to that, institutional mechanism. Now, organizations play a very significant role, in planning, development, and management. And in a view to give effective planning, development, and management of water resources on a hydrological unit basis, not just sectoral approach or a multidisciplinary approach, even participatory approach is required, and an integration is required from qualitative and quantitative aspects. And let's not forget the environmental aspects. So the existing institutions in various level in a decentralized framework that we have in our country, we do also have to check with whether how far these sectors are pretty much efficient. And when you talk about efficiency, we do also have several problems relating to budgeting. So for maintenance of water resource schemes under non-planned budget, it is generally being neglected. So an institutional arrangement should be such that this vital aspect is given importance, so that these several authorities which are in place, water resources sector, which are needs to be appropriately reoriented and reorganized, and if so required, even created, so that this institutional arrangement can give some equal and even more emphasis on new constructions of a water related framework in our country. So this is something which we have, and in fact, this policy also emphasized on, the existing agreements or awards of the tribunals, or even relevant laws, its scopes and powers of river basin organization. As I've mentioned a while back, that we have several river basin authorities. For example, with respect to River Ganga, we have one. So we have, to keep that thing in mind when we wish to take or prepare any comprehensive plan. So this multidisciplinary nature of water resource management is crucial only when you take into consideration all the factors, at the same point of time, be it a judicial or quasi-judicial, to be very specific, or any legislative, or even any administrative framework which is already in existence. Another element that we have under the water policy of 2002 is with respect to water allocation priorities. Now, this is something, the priorities has been set by this policy framework in planning and operation of systems. So this is how it goes, that it should be broadly followed like this: that drinking water has been given a very highest priority, followed by irrigation. This is not a hierarchy though, but the thing is that these are priorities in a way. They haven't said it as a hierarchy, like drinking water first, then irrigation, then hydropower, ecology, and all. But these are all the operation systems, which in fact, water allocation, when you're talking about allocating water, of course drinking water gets is first priority because that is required the most, and then irrigation because your agriculture is dependent on it, hydropower because you're referring to power generation, so power projects plays a very significant role in developmental activities, and ecological, which in fact refers to the environmental aspects, agro industries and non-agriculture industries, navigations and other users, they come in the later in the list. So this priorities could be modified, it could be added if warranted by the area or regional specific considerations. It can be like, from it is no straight jacket thing of it. It depends upon which area you're talking about, which region you're talking about. If a particular region requires drinking water to be the highest priority, it should be set like that. Irrigation to be the next, that is what it is. If it's a agro-based state, then for them, of course, irrigation will be a comparatively higher priority in comparison to hydropower or ecology. Navigation, for example, if that state is totally landlocked and there is no question of navigation, other uses, so that priority won't be there in that. So this is something which has to be set based on the